Phase 2 of the Democrats' impeachment inquiry into President Donald Trump kicks off this week. Tomorrow, the first public hearings will occur with testimony by George Kent. He's a senior official at the State Department, and William Taylor, the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine.
So the Republicans have argued that the impeachment case falls short of proving misconduct, even with the public inquiry. President Trump's campaign's coffers continue to fill up. So joining us to talk about the campaign's fundraising efforts and all that is Tim Murtaugh. He's the Director of Communication for President Trump's re-election campaign. Tim, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Thanks for having me.
So first, let's talk a little bit about impeachment. Of course, back in the last impeachment cycle that we saw, the Clinton team, the White House, Lanny Davis, there was this big machine that was gearing up to fight this. Tell us a little bit about the campaign strategy and to go after the impeachment inquiry and the plans to survive this and carry it forward into the general election.
Well, we're going to do a lot better than just survive it. I think the campaign and the president is going to be thriving as a result of this. We're working very closely with the White House and also the Republican National Committee and the campaign working together and combating what is clearly a partisan impeachment approach here by the Democrats. This might as well be branded the DNC impeachment. And let's remember what we're talking about here. The Democrats have talking about there's a quid pro quo. Well, that means in Latin, as you know, this for that. Let's talk about this. The people in the Ukraine said that they felt no pressure. They didn't know they were being pressured. They also didn't know that any military aid was being withheld. Then the aid began to flow, and finally, the Ukrainians didn't have to do anything in order to get the aid to flow. So not only was there no quid, there was no quo, there was no this, there was no that. There's nothing here. And this is a Democrat impeachment in search of a reason. And
so
they were always going to do. I'm old enough to remember when they were going to impeach the president for being a Russian agent.
Yeah.
I mean, can you remember back that far?
Yeah, it feels like a long time ago, but yes. So obviously you dispute sort of the underlying allegation here that there was, corruption or bribery, quid pro quo. If those allegations were proven out, though, do you think that represents an impeachable offense?
First, they won't be proven out because they can't.
No, I hear that, but I'm just wondering if you think the underlying conduct would be problematic from this president or another one.
I mean, I think you'd have to. No, I don't think so. I don't think that the president has to be able to set foreign policy. And what you have here we all know what was in the phone call. We've seen the transcript. Not a one of these witnesses who's been the leaked testimony. Not one of these witnesses has objected to the basic contents of the transcript. So everyone acknowledges that the transcript is essentially accurate. So what we have now is a parade of witnesses who are offering their opinions about what was said in this phone call. We all know what was said in the phone call. Why do we need to hear someone else's opinion about it? Nothing in there was untoward. What we have is a difference of opinion on setting foreign policy. I'm sorry to tell these various career diplomats and these witnesses coming forward, but the President of the United States sets the policy. Yeah. They may disagree if they want to. Disagreement on policy is not an impeachable offense.
Yeah, I've said that here as well. It's like, I don't know why we have to care what some NSC staffer thinks about Ukraine policy. But I do want to talk a little bit about the fundraising effort in particular, because impeachment, I know that some of the Trump people that I've spoken to say that the impeachment has actually been a great thing for enthusiasm on the Trump campaign and within the fundraising. Take us behind the scenes a little bit about the enthusiasm that you're seeing from the Trump base in particular that are giving to the president and feel fired up as a result of this inquiry.
I didn't know that it was possible to get the president's supporters more fired up, but this impeachment nonsense has done exactly that. In the day that Nancy Pelosi announced that the House was going to move forward with the impeachment inquiry, we raised $15 million in the 3 days immediately following that, $15 million in 72 hours. And that's from online small donations. To give you a comparison, that's how much Joe Biden raised in total in the entire 3-month quarter, right? We did that in 72 hours just from small online donations to give you an idea of how fired up the president's supporters got. And it's not just Republicans, it's not just Trump supporters, it's independents and even some fair-minded Democrats. Every single time the media and the Democrats go into a frenzy, we saw it when the Mueller report, again, remember when they were going to impeach the president because he was a Russian agent, and the Mueller report came out and all that fizzled. When the Mueller report dropped, we saw an incredible spike in enthusiasm in fundraising. Again, it's happening with impeachment. Every time the media and the Democrats go into a frenzy like this, our campaign raises a ton of money, which means we have greater interaction with voters online, which means our data gets better. Every time this happens, the president's re-election campaign gets bigger and stronger, and we raise more money.
One of the keys to his his success last time around was turning out voters who pollsters didn't expect to turn out, who were infrequent voters or, first-time voters. Do you think that you can expand on that success this time around, and what sort of data do you have to back that up?
We do think we can expand on that. Our strategy has always been from the beginning to win the states that the president won in 2016, keep those, and then expand the map to states where he came close last time. States like New Hampshire and Minnesota and New Mexico and Nevada, and even sometimes our campaign manager, Brad Parscale, likes to talk about Colorado and even Oregon, on the things that are on the sort of on the edge of possible, right? And so we see that rally after rally. Let's go over to say the last dozen rallies or so. We look at the data about who registers to attend these rallies, voters, and we see that about 25%. This is pretty consistent from rally to rally, no matter where we go. About 25% of the people who register for these rallies are Democrats or independents. A quarter of the people who register for a Trump rally, Democrats or independents. And then again, a quarter of the people who register have voted in only one federal election of the last four, or none at all in the last four federal elections. That means these are people, 25% of the people who are attending these rallies are disaffected voters, people who don't feel like they've been part of the process for a long time, would be considered new voters, having not voted in any of the last four elections. And also, I think a lot of people would be surprised to find out that fully a quarter of them are Democrats or independents. So these are not rallies, and this is not the president speaking only to his base.
Right.
I think that's a common misconception, or a common desire, actually.
The largest group of voters in this country are non-voters.
Yeah, correct.
That is the largest group of voters in this country.
Yeah.
It's kind of astounding. So take us a little bit about the behind the scenes. There's a lot of confusion, I think, sometimes about why the president is holding rallies in certain places. I know a lot of this was scrutinized when the president went to New Mexico, because I believe that El Paso rally had so much New Mexico support. They said, why don't we go to New Mexico? So a little bit behind the current map. There's been rallies all over the country. Tell us where they are, why they're particularly located in these places.
Well, I mean, I think people, it's funny, we had a rally in Dallas, Texas, and people say, why are you going to Texas? Oh, you must be worried about Texas. No, you're going to campaign and do things in places that helped you get into office in the first place. There's a lot of great supporters in Texas. There's a lot of people who support the president financially in Texas. Of course, we will rally in Texas. When they ask a question like that about, oh, you're going there, are you worried? Then what's the explanation for why we went to New Hampshire or Minneapolis up in Minnesota or in, as you just mentioned, New Mexico? We're going to places where the president's presence can make a difference. The most valuable thing that we have as a campaign is the president's time. And so he's only going to agree to go places where it matters and makes sense for his reelection campaign. New Hampshire is a place where he lost by fewer than 3,000 votes. Minnesota was only a point and a half. These are states that we firmly believe the president can win with his record. New Mexico was another state that was pretty close. And you're right, we saw data from a rally that we held in El Paso, Texas at the beginning of the year, which is just across the state line from New Mexico. And a lot of the people who attended the rally in El Paso were New Mexico residents. And so that piqued our interest. We started looking at it, and internally, our own numbers show that, New Mexico is definitely on the field of play, and we can make some movement in New Mexico, and that's why the president decided to go there. Other states he goes because there's an election coming up in that state, and the president goes to try to help out. We'll be in Louisiana here in just a couple days because they've got a governor's race finally coming up on the 16th.
And he was, of course, in Kentucky last week, and that was a race. I used to live in Kentucky, so I followed it really closely. We followed it closely here at the show. Governor Bevin, the Republican incumbent, was deeply unpopular and narrowly lost, it looks like, to Democrat Andy Beshear. Why do you think that Bevin came up short in a state that the president won by 30 points?
Well, let's look at the success of all the other Republicans who were on the ballot that day when Governor Bevin lost. You had the Republican won the race for Attorney General in Kentucky for the first time since 1948.
Right.
And he won by about 15 points. And he also became the first ever elected black statewide office holder. And as a Republican, that is fantastic news for the Republican Party and for the people of Kentucky. We had other people on the ballot who won by 19 points.
Right.
And I don't think the race has been finally called for governor, but the difference on election night was only 0.3 3. And this is a guy who was, Governor Bevin was down by double digits the whole way. And the president went in there and brought it, we think,
the polls had him tied coming in. But
how do you explain then the people winning by almost 20 points?
Well, but that's what I want to ask you about, though. Is do you think it was, sort of unique to Bevin that he was uniquely unliked?
He was unique to Bevin, and let's also look at Beshear, his opponent. He ran as a Trump-friendly Democrat. The Biden campaign would have you believe that, oh, this is the template, this is how we're going to do well in the South. I don't think you're going to see Joe Biden running pro-Trump television ads, because that's what Beshear did.
Right.
Beshear ran television ads with Trump voters saying, I'm a Trump voter and I'm voting for Beshear. He hugged President Trump. There is no question about it. He ran as a Trump-friendly Democrat. Let me see Joe Biden run that ad, and then I'll believe what they're talking about.
Well said, Tim. We appreciate you joining us.
Great to have you.
Thank you.
Coming up on Rising, it seems as if there are uprisings and unrest all over the world.
Managing editor of the Jacobin magazine, Micah Utik, I hope I say this right, Utik updates us on the latest in Bolivia and what it means for the rise of global democratic movements when Rising continues.